Chapter 1, Celestial Conspirators in the Canopy. A molten sun beat down upon the emerald sea of foliage, its rays slipping through the canopy to dance on damp earth. In the depths of the jungle, the rhythmic chatter of howler monkeys faded into near silence as 8 cloaked figures moved with practiced stealth along a narrow, vine-choked trail. Their footsteps, bare against the leaf litter, were soft, so soft that even a coati resting nearby on a mossy branch remained undisturbed. They carried no torches, only small obsidian blades tucked into their belts and clay tablets slung securely at their hips. At last, the trail opened into a secluded clearing, a natural amphitheater of limestone boulders carved by centuries of wind and rain. Centuries ago, a circle of stones had been deliberately placed here, their surfaces etched with concentric glyphs and angular notches pointing to cardinal directions. Now, the secret observatory lay hidden by half-grown vines and tumbling roots, known only to this select cabal of priest astronomers. 1. The Call of the Heavens. High Priest Zok began the ritual by tending a small fire at the edge of the platform, its smoke rising in thin ribbons toward the treetops. He drew intricate patterns in the ash with a slender reed brush, each curve echoing the path of a star or planet. As the others knelt behind him, heartbeats resonated like distant drums in the oppressive stillness. He spoke in hushed, measured tones. Tonight, we witness the grand conjunction of Venus and Jupiter, an omen that the gods themselves have carved into the sky. His voice carried weight, not merely because of his title, but because of the gravity of what he revealed next. The celestial alignment was not simply a harbinger of seasonal rains but a tool. If correctly interpreted, it could dictate when the rivers would swell, the maize would flourish, or the people would rise in rebellion. The other priest astronomers, known collectively as the Shields of Kinich, guardians of solar secrets, each unwrapped their obsidian mirrors, polished shards no larger than a human palm. These reflective surfaces, laid flat atop smaller stone altars, caught the dying light of dusk, casting prismatic glimmers across their painted faces. With each glint, they traced trembling lines on clay tablets, notation of Venus's heliacal rise, Jupiter's stationary drift, and the subtle wobble of the Pleiades cluster. 2. A pact forged beneath the stars. One by one, the shields murmured a vow, to bend their heavenly knowledge in service of K'ulel's young ruler, Ajah Balam II. The priest Shoba, his inked mask shaped like the open maw of a serpent, rose and placed his hand on the center of the stone circle. His voice was low but fervent. We swear upon the face of Kinich Ahau that our scrolls will decree what must be believed. If in truth we foresee a blessed season, the people will swell with devotion. If not, they shall still follow, for how can mortals argue with the words of gods? At that moment, a hush enveloped them. The flickering torches cast long, spidery shadows across their cloaks, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. High Priest Zok added the final clause. Let no one beyond this circle know of our true findings. The calculus of gods is to be ours alone, until the time is ripe. With that pact sealed, they bent low over their tablets, adding one final notation, year 9.16.4.10.8, the moment when Venus would stand directly above Kinich Ahau's throne shadow, marking the dawning of abundance. 3. A false promise of rain. Weeks later, at dawn's muted purple light, the priests gathered once more, this time, at the stone steps of the Great Pyramid in the heart of K'ulel. A hush fell over the plaza as the priest astronomers ascended the tiers, each step an echo in the silent courtyard. From the highest terrace, High Priest Zok unfurled a richly colored banner depicting a great maize stalk entwined with a Jupiter glyph. He proclaimed in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. People of K'ulel, hear our prophecy. As the twin serpents of Venus and Jupiter merge in the eastern sky, so too shall the waters descend. A season of abundant rains is upon us, plant now with faith, and your granaries shall overflow. Below him, a mass of farmers and artisans bowed in reverent unison, their hopes pinned on this divine decree. Cornfields were plowed 2 weeks ahead of the traditional planting season, adobe granaries were swept out and purified with copal incense. Word of this sure sign did not remain within K'ulel's walls. Messengers carried the decree to neighboring polities, El Naranjo, Saalak, Koban. Jealous rulers, fearful of being left behind, mobilized armies to take advantage. War drums echoed before the rains even began, and alliances shifted like sand underfoot. But as the sun arced overhead, not a single cloud gathered. Day after blistering day, fields lay parched. A hush turned to murmurs of doubt. On the seventh dawn, when the promise remained unfulfilled, hushed conversations in the market square took on a sharper edge. Is it Zok's calculations that are flawed, or has K'inich abandoned us? The priests speak of rain in the sky, but our rivers grow shallow. Furtive glances were cast toward the mounting granaries in K'uk'ol, filled only with the hushed hopes of the people, now rotted by scorching light. The first seeds of suspicion took root. If the priests could lie about suns and stars, could they not lie about the gods themselves? 4. Seeds of doubt and the shadow of rebellion. Back in the jungle's protective darkness, the shields of K'inich gathered again at their hidden observatory. Torchlight flickered across their faces, now etched with uncertainty. Shoba's serpent mask was removed, revealing hollowed cheeks and eyes haunted by the fields of K'uk'ol. The people grow suspicious. The farmers' caravans converge on the palace gates, demanding answers. Why have the gods turned their faces from us? They clutched their empty granaries like cold bones. High Priest Zok clenched his fists around a chipped obsidian mirror. We cannot let this unravel. If we admit our error, Balaam's throne will crumble. We must recalibrate, forge new omens. Across the circle, another priest, Yukub, whose name was whispered only by the oldest of scribes, broke the silence. There is a flaw in the Dresden Codex, an errata no one saw. Our calculations for Jupiter's retrograde were slanted by a single glyph. Balaam's coronation feast prevented me from noticing until, too late. At these words, a tremor ran through the group. Shoba's lips tightened. Do you mean our revered codex, scribed by ancestors, holds an error of such magnitude? Yukub nodded, eyes downcast. Yes. The notation for the constellation of the Macaw is off by 5 days. It shifts Jupiter's station by nearly half a waxing cycle. The gods' reckoning is ours to blame. They exchanged haunted glances. In that moment, the majestic illusion of Maya infallibility cracked. The very tools they had sworn to wield as divine instruments were tarnished. And while the sun set behind the canopy, the shadows of doubt lengthened, ready to sow rebellion among the shaken faithful. Chapter 2, Fateful Calendar Edict. Dawn's first light spilled over the stepped tiers of the Great Pyramid in K'uk'ol, bathing its limestone facade in a soft rose glow. Torches still flickered in alcoves carved into the platform's broad landing, but the plaza below had already filled with a sea of villagers. Fishermen wore woven cotton cloaks, their nets secured to shoulders, farmers came with obsidian-bladed hoes slung across backs, artisans carried bundles of dyed cloth. Even traders and scribes from distant markets had arrived, drawn by word that the high priest Zok would read a new prophecy from the Dresden Codex. 1. Gathering in the Grand Plaza. The plaza was an amphitheater of human expectation. Row upon row of people stretched from the pyramid's wide staircase to the shadowed colonnades that lined K'uk'ol's inner sanctum. Between them, dogs nosed at scraps of tortilla dropped by early arrivals. Children, faces painted with bright ochre patterns, darted through gaps, imitating the low drone of conch shell trumpets calling for silence. At the foot of the stairs, a pair of royal guards in feathered helmets stood motionless, spears vertical like the bones of giant birds. Their stillness contrasted with the palpable excitement, hushed conversations. Will the rivers rise? Is the harvest certain? Fluttered like birds among the crowd. Merchants balanced woven baskets atop their heads, hoping to sell offerings of cacao, jade beads, and incense to those preparing to pledge before the gods. 2. The arrival of the high priest. A deep gong sounded from within the temple above, a single, resonant note that echoed off every stone surface and stilled all chatter. From the shaded recesses of the pyramid's upper terrace emerged High Priest Zok, clad in a cloak of emerald green cotton embroidered with golden maize glyphs. On his chest hung a carved jade disc bearing the glyph for Venus, its surface polished to a milky sheen. He moved precisely, each footstep cushioned by soft leather sandals. At his side walked 2 junior priests carrying the Dresden Codex itself, an elaborate folding book of deer-hide pages, its surface painted with swirls of red, black, and turquoise glyphs.
The priests handled it gingerly, never allowing its edges to touch the ground. As they ascended the final steps, torch glow revealed intricate carvings behind them, serpents coiled around the throne of Kinichahau, interlaced with symbols of rain and maize. 3. The prophecy unfurled. Zok paused at the summit, turning to face the assembled masses. He lifted a hand, adorned with jade rings that clinked like distant rainfall. The plaza fell completely silent, as though the entire city held its breath. People of K'uk'ol, Zok intoned, voice deliberately measured. Hear now the words of the gods. By the alignment of Venus and Jupiter, in the year 9.16.4.10.8, a season of unparalleled abundance awaits us. The rains will return to nourish our fields. The rivers will swell to lift our canoes. Corn will sprout in chorus, and the granaries of our heirs will overflow. Plant now with unshakable faith. As each syllable left his lips, the junior priests gently unfurled a banner draped over the codex's cover. The banner bore a lavish depiction of a maize stalk entwined with a shining star, Venus above, Jupiter below. Sunlight glinted off its painted feathers, and a collective murmur washed through the plaza, a mixture of awe and gratitude. 4. Impatient neighbors take action. Word of this divine edict traveled fast beyond K'uk'ol's sandstone walls. Envoys, dispatched mere moments after the proclamation, rode swiftly along raised causeways, Sakbi, toward neighboring polities, El Naranjo, Saalak, and Koban. By mid-morning, war drums pounded in El Naranjo's stone-paved square. Their priests, wearing crimson-painted masks of the rain god Chak, declared that if K'uk'ol's fields would prosper, so too must their own. El Naranjo's ruler, Ajah Kinich, raised his obsidian-bladed dagger, calling for a preemptive strike, convinced that K'uk'ol's divine favor would leave them vulnerable only months later. Farmers in Saalak abandoned their milpas, swidden fields, to sharpen spears, believing that conquest now would secure their share of heaven-sent bounty. Messengers perched atop watchtowers at Koban relayed smoky signals, 3 columns of black curling skyward, summoning all able-bodied men to arms. Even distant port city Zikalango, hearing tales of wealth, whispered of forging alliances to infiltrate K'uk'ol under the guise of trade. The air, once thick with anticipation of rain-fed harvests, turned heavy with the musk of sharpened obsidian and sweat-streaked brows. 5. The early planting and fool's hope. Back in K'uk'ol, beneath the shadow of the pyramid where carved Chak masks leered eternally, rivers of people fanned out into the hinterlands. Plows carved deep furrows, deeper than ever before, catching the dry breeze rather than moisture. Women trudged behind, scattering kernels of white and red maize with determined hands, chanting blessings they no longer believed. Town officials measured out fertilizer from cenote-muddied clay vases, recalling old rituals meant only for the regular planting season. Ritual feasts erupted with an air of triumph, dancers in jaguar skin kilts turned cartwheels, and drummers pounded in rhythm said to summon the very rains. Piglets were sacrificed atop hillock shrines, their hearts still thrashing as priests invoked Chak's favor. As bowls of cacao and maize dough were passed among the elite, Zok and his fellow priest astronomers exchanged subtle glances, stiffening when the crowd cheered louder. 6. The sky that never turned. Days passed, and the heavens held fast, not a single cloud drifted across the cobalt expanse. At midday, the sun glared mercilessly, forcing even the bravest in the fields to slaughter a chicken, sprinkle its warm blood over the parched earth, and pray for artesian springs that never came. Families returned with empty baskets, faces pinched with worry. Traders wove through the plaza, trying to sell last season's squash and beans at higher prices, but buyers balked at the cost. Corn sprouts curled in the ground like cracked chests, and the once lush milpa turned a brittle brown. On the 5th morning, when a gentle breeze failed to bring relief, whispers began, "Why does the sun betray us?" The priests spoke with forked tongues. Page, village shaman priests, claimed the gods were angered by secret crimes, but none could name the offense. The very rituals meant to honor the gods now seemed hollow echoes. 7. Hunger, rage, and blame. Cramped pottery wheels clattered in the marketplace as potters tried to fashion water jugs from parched clay, only to have them crack in the kiln's heat. Blacksmiths hammered away at battered hose for reforging, yet metal strained and warped beneath scorching coals. Walkways leading to the temple were littered with wilted offerings, bundles of sweetgrass, melted beeswax candles, half-burned copal incense. Each symbolized blind devotion, now wasted. By the seventh evening, children wept at empty hearths. Among them, a basket weaver named Ixim looked skyward with hollow eyes. Her husband, a milpa laborer, lay in a cot thrashing with fever, likely malaria exacerbated by weakened grain reserves. As dusk settled, a mob gathered at the sandstone base of the pyramid, torches raised like a swarm of fire beetles. "The priests lie," they shouted. "The gods will not save us." Stones arced through the air, arrows of anger aimed at the carved chak masks lining the temple walls. Guards wove through the crowd, attempting to hold the masses back, but their mottled, sweat-drenched cloaks wore thin. In a shadowed corridor behind the high terrace, Zok watched firelight flicker against the jagged glyphs sewn into his ceremonial mantle. The chanting of rioters drifted up like a funeral dirge. He clenched his jaw, brain racing. They had known, somewhere they must have known. Yet to admit the error would unravel all, the pact, Ajah Balaam's rule, even the fragile balance of power. 8. Seeds of Insurrection and the Priesthood's Response. That night, in the inner sanctum of the temple, the priest-astronomers convened again, this time in heavy silence. A single oil lamp burned in a carved stone recess, sending a quivering glow across their lined faces. Shilba, shoulders hunched, began, "Our mounting errors leave no path forward if the people learn the truth. They suspect we manufactured prophecy to empower Ajah Balaam. They will not accept that a single glyph in the Dresden Codex could be to blame." Yukub, trembling, whispered, "We must amend the record publicly, claim the comet of Kukulkan blocked the rains. Show them a sign that we serve the gods, not ourselves." High Priest Zok closed his eyes, voice low and resolute, "Then we erect a new omen. At dawn, we will ascend the pyramid's highest terrace and reveal the comet glyph found in codex pages hidden from common eyes. We will say Chek's tears were held by great lords, only now released." Across the small circle, priests exchanged fearful glances. They knew the danger: expose one deception, and others would unravel more easily. Still, the die was cast. To save the ruler's throne, and their own lives, they would spin another cosmic lie. Chapter 3, The Hidden Chambers of Tzun K'uk'ol. Twilight waned over Tzun K'uk'ol, its golden rays retreating to leave the city's pyramids shrouded in climbing shadows. The air, still thick with the sweat of midday, began to cool, though only marginally, so that every breath felt like warm honey slipping down the throat. Above the city's bustling corridors, tucked beneath the grand pyramids whose terraces gleamed in last of the dying light, lay a secret labyrinth few dared speak of. A hidden world of obsidian and skull-carved stone, where the very pulse of political power throbbed with forbidden rites. 1. Stairway to Secrets. Beneath the surface, at the base of the pyramid of Tzun K'uk'ol's western face, a narrow, unmarked entrance gaped like a dark wound in the rock. Overgrown vines clung to its edges, and only a faint trickle of water, dripping from a moss-laden block, betrayed its existence. At the appointed hour, 2 masked sentinels slid aside the limestone slab, revealing a steep, crouching stairway carved directly into bedrock. Each step was worn slick by countless feet, the edges softened by centuries of use. Priest Noble Ixman led the way, his sandals echoing softly against the stone. From beneath his headdress, woven with quetzal feathers and tiny carved jade beads, his eyes shone with both reverence and purpose. Behind him trailed 6 nobles draped in ceremonial cloaks, each cloak the color of midnight, hooded and hood's edge embroidered in red cotton to signify their high caste. Their faces were obscured by masks of gleaming black obsidian, sculpted in the likeness of the death god Chak's younger sibling, a being who, according to legend, escorted lost souls beneath the earth. One by one, they descended into the darkness, torches flickering in short, unsteady bursts. The walls of the corridor closed in until only a narrow slit of light marked the outside world. Moisture beaded on the ceiling, trickling into shallow puddles that reflected torchlight like floating flames. The smell of damp earth mixed with burnt copal, evidence of earlier offerings, invigorated each inhalation. 2. Skull-lined galleries. At the corridor's end, a carved stone door blocked passage. Ivory inlays formed the outline of a yawning skull, its jaws agape as though awaiting sacrificial offerings. A silent sentinel, etched into the lintel, told the story of past rites, small figures lifting a bundle of reeds before a seated king. Ixman placed his palm against the skull's forehead and said a prayer in low, guttural tones. The door responded, sliding open with a muted creak to admit them into a vaulted gallery of stone. Flickering torchlight revealed the gallery's grotesque adornments. Niches in the walls held sculpted skulls, each a perfect cast of different victims, their features eerily individualized. Some bore cracks where long ago chisels pried them loose, others glistened with damp sheen, as though perspiring in terror once more. The floor was woven of tightly fitted stones, worn nearly smooth by the feet of countless participants in secret ceremonies, and tiny rivulets of water ran along narrow channels carved at the floor's perimeter. Whispers, barely audible but thick with ritual urgency, drifted upward from a side chamber. In that alcove, masked nobles moved in methodical procession around a central dais. Ixman and his entourage paused at the threshold, hearts pounding, as they watched the forbidden rite unfold. 3. Obsidian black ink and bloodletting hymns. Upon the dais knelt 3 masked figures, their masks shaped in the likeness of jaguar jaws, jewels for teeth and onyx for fangs. One of them, the chief ritualist, wore a mantle of black-dyed cotton streaked with crimson spirals. He dipped a slender bone stylus into a shallow bowl of obsidian black ink. As darkness pooled over his fingertips, he began drawing intricate lines across the thighs and forearms of each kneeling noble, marking them with glyphs that signified loyalty, vengeance, and the covenant of blood. Around the dais, a circle of torch-bearers, each masked in polished jade plates, stood silently, their eyes reflecting dancing flames. The chief ritualist chanted in a guttural tenor, his voice resonating off the chamber's curved ceiling. "Oh, lords of the night sky, hear our plea. Bless the covenant of blood we spill this eve. Let our union of clans be sealed in crimson, that we may stand indivisible against those who deceive." At the chant's apex, one noble raised a golden-edged flint knife. Under the watchful gaze of jade-faced guardians, he pressed the obsidian blade to his forearm, the glint of metal catching torchlight. The blade tore flesh with deliberate slowness. A drop of blood fell into a vessel etched with the glyph for renewal, where it mixed with the residual obsidian ink. Each drop dyed the oil-thin viscera a deep amethyst, and from the vessel the chief ritualist took the mixture, stirring it clockwise around the dais, an act meant to propitiate both solar and underworld deities. Around the chamber, the masked nobles followed suit, slitting their earlobes, tongues, or inner wrists, each drop of blood joining the shared vessel. The mingled ink and blood became the symbol of an unbreakable bond between rival houses, forged beneath Tzun K'uk'ol's towering pyramids. Their faces, unseen beneath carved obsidian, trembled as if the very act of sharing blood drew them irrevocably into each other's fate. 4. A desperate scribe's confession. Darkness pressed close in the chamber's far corner, where a single torch sputtered against the humid air. There, cradled between 2 carved stone pillars, knelt a lone figure, priest scribe Yukin, his head bent over a clay tablet. The mask he wore menaced with stylized fangs, but his voice, low and urgent, cracked as he carved each glyph. His reed stylus scratched against softened clay, producing fresh dust that caught the torchlight like miniature stars. Yukin's lips were crusted with coagulated blood, relic of earlier self-flagellation, a sign that he no longer hoped for mercy. On the tablet, he inscribed a royal decree, each stroke a confession of complicity, that the drought graying the fields above was not divine punishment but the result of priestly manipulation, that the prophecy of abundant rain was knowingly false, that Ajah Balaam's rule had been erected on a foundation of lies. Below his confession, the tablet bore his final plea, that the people learn the truth, even if it cost him his life. As the chanting of blood rites reached a crescendo, one masked noble glanced toward Yukin's corner. Realization flickered behind his obsidian mask. The scribe dares to inscribe treason beneath our covenant. A warning hiss passed among the torchbearers, and one swept across the chamber as a serpent between stones. The chief ritualist, his obsidian black mantle gleaming, stepped forward, robe trailing like spilled ink. He raised a jeweled hand. Enough. Let his final act be drawn into the sacred covenant. Two jade-masked figures seized Yukin by the shoulders, hauling him to his feet. Before the council of nobles, his clay tablet lay exposed. The chamber stilled, torchlight flickering across the fresh glyphs. High Priest Zok's voice, deep as rolling thunder, broke the silence. Since his stroke is already set, let his words be added to our ledger of damnation. His confession belongs to the gods now. He claims we blame the skies for drought, indeed, we serve the true rulers of fate, ourselves. With a swift motion, a masked noble poured the contents of the ink and blood vessel over Yukin's tablet. The viscous mixture ran over glyphs, smudging them into illegibility. Murmurs of approval rose, a ritualistic erasure of treachery. Yukin's anguished scream echoed only briefly before it was smothered by the chorus of chanting, now rising to a fevered pitch. 5 Secrets sealed in obsidian and stone. In the flickering gloom, the chamber's heavy stone doors, each hammered with nails of polished jade, banged shut. The sound resonated like a heart slamming shut in finality. Tunneled corridors branched off into deeper shadows, but none dared follow. In this sealed sanctum, the conspiracies of Tzun K'uk'ol's nobles would be preserved in hushed whispers and half-kept oaths. There, the truth of celestial miscalculation and political betrayal would lie buried beneath layers of ritual and blood. Above, the pyramid silhouette stood stark against the ink-stained sky. In the waning night, stars trembled, and a lone owl called from the canopy, yet the entire city slept, unaware that beneath their feet the gears of a grand conspiracy had been greased with ink and sealed by blood. Chapter 4, A Spectre's Whisper, The Disgraced Scribe. Moonlight filtered through the cracked stucco ceiling of Quel's outer dungeon, slanting across damp flagstones and sputtering torch sconces. The air reeked of mold and sweat, a fetid reminder of the city's shifting loyalties. In one shadowed cell, chained by heavy obsidian cuffs, knelt the fallen scribe Yukin, his once pristine robes now ragged, stained deep with the earth-red clay from that cursed confession. Every breath he drew seemed drawn from the netherworld itself, ragged and shallow, as if he feared the very air might betray him to his captors. Chains of betrayal. Word of Yukin's treason had traveled swiftly, a compromise of divine truth for the sake of his conscience. Branded a heretic, he was dragged from the secret chambers of Tzun K'uk'ol to Quel's fortress-like palace, a slab of cold stone in contrast to the warm tunnels where he had carved his confession. 2 guards flanked him, their faces hidden behind jade masks, each footstep echoing like a gavel in the stone corridor. Inside the central courtyard, torches blazed in metal vessels, casting jittery reflections on the high priest's jaguar-headed throne. There, Zok sat flanked by 2 priest astronomers, their obsidian mirrors at the ready. Yukin was hauled to his feet and shoved forward, chains clanging against the granite paving. Villagers and soldiers formed a half-circle around the plaza, some silent with shock, others murmuring curses at the scribe they believed had betrayed them. The accusation laid bare. High Priest Zok rose, his jade-tipped scepter clicking against the stone. A hush fell. Yukin, Zok's voice rang out, a cold wind through the courtyard, you dared to claim that our sacred calendars are flawed, an affront to Kinichahau and to Ajah Balam too, whom we serve. You have confessed that we manipulated the divine will for personal gain. Do you stand by your words? Yukin's head bowed, lips chapped, but his gaze held a fierce glint. I stand by them with my final breath, High Priest. The Codex's error is on record. I could not watch fields perish on lies. A ripple of shock ran through the assembled crowd. Guards shifted, ready for a signal, but none came. Instead, Zok's eyes narrowed, half fury, have pity. Very well. Let the gods judge your soul. But know this, no error in the great codex can rival the error of disloyalty. Justice must be swift. The sentence of death and the hidden glyph. The executioner, a silent figure in a quilted obsidian laminated cloak, stepped forward, a long blade at his side. He spoke not a word as he severed Yukin's chains and prodded him with a bone-tipped staff toward the sacrificial altar, a low stone dais carved with the image of a serpent consuming the sun. 2 witnesses, priests with masks shaped like the twin deities of drought, raised ritual banners and chanted a lament. O Zibalbay's herald, bearer of truth's burden. Your tongue revealed misdeed, your flesh shall redeem our burden. Through blood and shadow, your spirit return. To guide us from darkness or to watch us burn. Amid the chanting, Yukin's eyes roamed the altar's glyphs, serpents in perpetual devour, raindrops carved in perfect rings, and a single star symbol encircled by a wreath of maize, a glyph he alone recognized as marking Palenque, the rival city that boasted its own storied observatory. His breath caught as he realized the scribe's promise, his final gambit: even if he died here, his message would live on. Vanishing into night. When the executioner raised his blade, the hush broke as a commotion erupted at the edge of the courtyard. Guards shouted, "He flees! Seize him!" But no scribe remained. Yukin's cell must have been unlocked from within, no door bore the marks of force. In panicked surprise, pursuers spilled into narrow alleyways, torches swinging as they chased shadows that were already gone. In their wake, only a scrap of deer-hide parchment fluttered in the torchlight, caught on a metal grating, a single glyph depicting that encircled Star Anme's mark, pointing an arrow toward the east. By dawn's first blush, K'u'ol's leaders discovered the empty chamber where Yukin had been held. The chains still lay coiled on the stone floor, but the scribe himself had evaporated like mist. No bribe of gold, no threat of torture, had induced his silence, yet he had chosen to disappear, carrying his secret to safety. In whispers among the palace guard, tales spread of a ghostly figure slipping through locked gates, leaving only that solitary glyph to betray his destination. The seed of rebellion ignited. In the bleak silence following Yukin's escape, K'u'ol's rulers faced an unsettling truth: the people, already hungry and fearful, would not easily forget the scribe's confession. Rumors of Palenque's observatory grew. Some swore they'd seen cloaked figures carrying bundles toward the pier by the western moat, bound for distant rivers. The glyph Yukin left behind, scribed with trembling urgency, was now a beacon for those seeking an alternative source of truth. In secret gatherings around smoldering hearths, elders and farmers whispered of joining Palenque, of reclaiming genuine star lore and cast-off priestly lies. High Priest Zok and the council convened once more in the hidden sanctum beneath the pyramid, where stale incense clung to the air and glyphic murals reflected torchlight like silent sentinels. Shoba's voice trembled as he looked to his peers. He has pointed them to Palenque. If the people follow, K'u'ol's hold will crumble like dry clay. Zok's eyes, cold and narrowing, hardened. Then we must strike first. We'll label any who flee as traitors and send patrols along the Sakbi. Let Yukin's glyph be a curse to any who walk that path. But as they spoke, the lantern's sputter seemed to whisper a warning. In trying to snuff out Yukin's spark, they risked igniting a flame that would burn down every lie they had built. Chapter 5, Blood on the Sun God's Terrace. A heavy hush settled over Palenque as the sun dipped toward the western horizon. Atop the city's immense pyramid, known to the common folk as the Temple of the Inscriptions, priests and nobles gathered on the broad terrace, their voices hushed in reverence and apprehension. Below them, the lush rainforest canopy stretched interminably, the rustling of leaves punctuated by distant howler monkeys echoing through the humid air. It was an auspicious evening. An eclipse had been predicted by Palenque's priests, a celestial event meant to validate their unmatched mastery of the heavens. Yet as the first shadow crept across the sun's fiery disk, a ripple of shock ran through the assembly. This eclipse bore none of the expected portents. The unforeseen eclipse. At the peak of the terrace, High Priest Ojkin, his headdress of quetzal plumes crowned with a jade sun glyph, stood beside the great stone sun dial. His fingers were stained with cinnabar, the traditional ink used to mark auspicious dates. Across the courtyard, a pale, trembling light softened the carved facade of the Palace of the Inscriptions, where inscriptions of previous eclipses foretold blessings and curses in equal measure. As the moon's shadow inched over the sun, Ojken raised his reed staff, a delicately carved rod adorned with tiny jade discs representing each day of the Tzolk'in calendar. He chanted a litanies of praise to Kinichahau, the sun god, beseeching him to reveal the omen's true meaning. The assembled nobles, draped in cloaks of midnight blue cotton embroidered with golden star glyphs, stood rigid, eyes fixed on the heavens. But as the sun dimmed beyond any recorded prediction, instead of the expected ruby lens corona, a blood-red ring flickered once before fading into an eerie darkness. Gasps escaped the crowd. Twilight fell faster than custom dictated, and even the distant rainforest seemed to hold its breath. Villagers who had gathered below, bathers from the sacred river, families on midday rest, looked skyward in alarm, clutching children to their chests. An eclipse beyond the priest's calculations was unthinkable. Whispers of sabotage. Within moments, murmurs grew into frantic whispers, the prophecy was false. Palenque's priests have erred. Fear coiled through the plaza like a serpent. From the western end of the terrace, a contingent of El Naranjo envoys had arrived clutching sealed scrolls. Their emissary, clad in a mask of turquoise blue inlaid with mother-of-pearl, knelt before Palenque's Ajah Khana, the young ruler draped in a cloak of crimson with a sash of obsidian beads. With trembling hands, the envoy unfurled a scroll bearing the sigil of El Naranjo, a snarling jaguar head, and spoke in clipped, urgent tones. Your high priest Ojken has declared this eclipse a sign of mortal danger. But we bear witness that the alignment was not as calculated. Our own priests observed no such shadow on their star charts. Did Palenque's priests manipulate the observatory, ensuring this darkening for political gain? A muffled gasp rippled through the terrace. Palenque's court scribes, two young acolytes poised to record the omen, faltered, eyes flicking between their instruments and the raven-haired MC before them. Skepticism hung thick like the damp heat. Nearby, Chilon Nal, Palenque's most seasoned astronomer-priest, snapped upright. He wore an elaborate headdress crowned with a carved conch shell, symbol of voice and prophecy. His voice, when he spoke, was a rasping whisper. Rumors speak of shadow-casting devices, obsidian discs placed atop the northern slope of the temple, moved by treacherous hands to block the sun. El Naranjo would have us believe we conspired to sow fear. Yet if it were so, why betray our own sanctity? His words did little to quell the rising tension. Instead, they seemed to fan the embers of doubt. The tantric black mirror used for eclipse observation, positioned in the central alcove of the temple, lay broken on the temple plaza below, shards of obsidian glimmering like fallen stars. A gap in its polished surface suggested it had been struck by a blunt stone, not chance or wear. Among the crowd, a rumor took shape. El Naranjo's priests had sabotaged Palenque's instruments, shattering the mirror to fabricate an eclipse's full obscuration. By manufacturing panic, they aimed to weaken Palenque's hold on neighboring alliances. Courtly pandemonium and panic. As darkness deepened, the crowd's panic intensified. Courtiers collapsed to their knees, pressing foreheads to the stone terrace, uttering desperate prayers to appease the sun god. Distant drums sounded an emergency code, a signal that the king's palace was under threat. Narrow archers' windows along the palace walls opened, and guards in jaguar skin kilts poured arrows skyward, an act meant to ward off any perceived malevolent spirits. Amid the pandemonium, Palenque's Ajah Khana, youthful yet resolute, rose from his throne, his heart pounding like a war drum. He stepped to the edge of the terrace and raised a ceremonial flint dagger, the blade catching the ghostly twilight. People of Palenque, he called, voice echoing against the stone carvings, fear not. Though our instruments have failed, our devotion remains firm. The god Kinichahau shall return, and we shall not bow to mere mechanics of obsidian and bone. We shall prove our faith with a ritual unseen for centuries. A ripple of confusion spread, the populace expected an explanation, a true omen from the heavens. Instead, their ruler prepared to perform a ritual that would transform despair into hope. The sun god's vow. Within the palace's inner sanctum, beyond where common eyes could reach, a narrow staircase led to a clandestine chamber hewn beneath the palace floor. This vaulted room, its walls plastered with painted glyphs and lined with niches housing ceremonial masks carved in the likeness of the sun deity, was reserved for the most sacred of royal oaths. Palenque's jaw descended, flanked by 2 junior priests. The thick, humid air weighed on him as incense coils smoked in suspended ceramic dishes, the scent of copal mingling with citrusy sap. At the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, its surface carved with a sun glyph surrounded by 12 rays, each representing a month of Palenque's ceremonial calendar. From a satchel at his side, the king withdrew a blood-smeared quill fashioned from the feather of a hummingbird, the rarest of offerings to the gods. He knelt before the altar, shoulders bowed by the weight of expectation. Around him, 6 priests with jade masks stood sentinel, each with a slender knife and an obsidian mirror ready to catch his offering. By this sacred blood, Ajah whispered, placing the quill point to his forehead, I pledge the future of Palenque's star lore. Let kin of El Naranjo quake before this vow, my people shall preserve the knowledge of Kinich even if our city falls to dust. A drop of his own blood welled at the quill's tip. He pressed it to the altar's center, the crimson staining the carved sun glyph. The priests chanted. O sun god, hear his vow. Though darkness reign, truth shall endure. The stars shall guide us to hidden refuges, and the children of Palenque shall rise anew. The quill's blood pooled into the sun's carved eye. A symbol that this oath bound the king and his realm to celestial faith beyond physical temple walls. The sacred exodus, foretold. As the final prayer echoed through the vaulted space, Ajah Kana stood and, voice steady, addressed the gathered priests. Let it be known, Palenque's visible splendor may be tested by drought, by sabotage, or by the machinations of rivals. Yet our legacy lies in our star lore, not in stone alone. I hereby ordain a sacred exodus. When night next swallows the sun, a chosen few will depart these red sandstone halls to carry our codices, our mirrors, and our lineage of scholars into the highlands. There, in hidden fortresses, our flame of knowledge shall burn eternal. The priests exchanged grave nods. They understood the gravity of such a proclamation. To scatter Palenque's brightest minds and sacred texts into the hills was to acknowledge that their city could not stand alone. The sacred exodus was both a promise of survival and an admission of vulnerability. Across the city, the eclipse deepened, then receded more quickly than any living soul had ever witnessed. The sun re-emerged, blood-red at first, then regaining its golden intensity, yet its return did little to calm the hearts of Palenque's people. Crowds in the plaza below hesitated to celebrate. Some fell to pray in tears, others knelt to offer thanks, but none could forget the unnerving darkness that had no rightful place in the known cosmos. High Priest Ojkan reappeared on the terrace, his face streaked with sweat and ash. He raised a jade vessel, spilling a few drops of precious sacred water onto the sun dial, murmuring, "Let this water sanctify the renewed sun. May its light guide our chosen to verdant heights, where drought cannot reach, and where the stars themselves will guard our sacred lore." As he spoke, a hush fell over Palenque's citizens, a moment of reconciliation between reverence and uncertainty. The eclipse had cracked their faith, but now, under the restored sun, they vowed to heed their ruler's sacred exodus directive, preserving the celestial truth for future generations. Chapter 6, Veiled Message Beneath the Jaguar Throne. The mid-morning sun slanted through the dense foliage of Palenque's surrounding forest, dappling the city's stepped terraces with shifting patterns of light. At first glance, the Temple of the Inscriptions appeared as it had for generations, an imposing edifice of red sandstone and stucco, its facade adorned with intricately carved glyphs extolling King Pakal's divine lineage. Yet beneath its polished grandeur lay a secret chamber, sealed for centuries, awaiting the moment when its revelation would rewrite the fate of an empire. Discovery of a hidden passage. It was Sak Nik, a junior priest architect with a penchant for observing structural anomalies, who first noticed the subtle irregularity in the northern wall of Palenque's tomb. He traced a streak of discoloration, yellowed limestone among red sandstone, suggesting an unintentional exposure to moisture, as though water had seeped through cracks veiled by centuries of neglect. Kneeling to examine it, his slender fingers brushed away centuries of dust and lichen, exposing a row of minuscule glyphs etched into the stone, a coiled jaguar, a broken waterglyph, and an inverted star symbol. Heart-pounding, Sak Nik relayed his discovery to Tzun K'uk'ol, the temple's chief keeper of sacred architecture. Together, they summoned a small cohort of royal scribes, masonry experts, and priest astronomers. By the light of torches and the echo of whispered consultations, they chipped away a section of plaster that concealed a narrow seam. Behind it, a seam of polished limestone led into darkness, a secret stairway carved directly into the bedrock. Unearthing the forgotten glyphs. As the group descended the steep, narrow staircase, the air grew cooler, damp, and heavy with incense from their lowering torches. The walls transitioned from the familiar red sandstone of the temple's outer facade to a pale, calcified stone, evidence they had entered a deliberately hidden vault. Along the corridor, recessed niches held shattered pottery pieces and faded wall paintings, each depicting a royal procession with Palenque's visage crowned by a resplendent quetzal feathered headdress. At the corridor's end, they emerged into a small antechamber. Here, a massive stone door barred further passage, its surface carved with a fearsome jaguar's face, eyes inlaid with jade that gleamed eerily in torchlight. Below the jaguar's open jaws, an inscription read in Palenque's dialect. "Here lies our final testament. May the gods judge the betrayed and sustain the hidden." Tzun K'uk'ol exchanged a grave glance with Sak Nik. They pressed against a concealed lever, a carved stone glyph of a turning sun, unlocking the door with a grinding rumble. Beyond lay the tomb chamber itself, long sealed by layers of rubble and centuries of paint. As they removed debris, the chamber's vaulted ceiling revealed murals in stucco relief. Depictions of bloodletting rituals, celestial alignments, and processions through mountainous highlands that matched no known site in the surrounding lowlands. The jaguar throne and its secret. At the tomb's center stood a raised dais, a throne fashioned from a single, colossal slab of obsidian black limestone. Carved into its backrest was the visage of a jaguar's snarling face, fangs bared as though mid-roar. The throne seat bore a deep depression, precisely shaped to hold a jade-encrusted stone codex box. Flanking the dais, two carved stone panels depicted Palenque's final journey, ascending a mountain temple with his retinue, then descending through mist-shrouded peaks clutching bundles of scrolls and star charts. As Tzun K'uk'ol swept away the final layer of dust from the throne's base, he uncovered a glyph-filled panel hidden beneath a slab, a veiled message inscribed in blood-red pigment that had soaked into the limestone centuries earlier. "When shadows eclipse our sanctuaries, we shall retreat to the high places. Jaguars roar guards what is sacred. Our star-lore preserved beyond the flood." The assembled priests stared in stunned silence. This was no ordinary burial inscription, nor a dirge praising Palenque's ancestors. Instead, it was a plan of strategic withdrawal, authored by Palenque's own hand or by those closest to him, an instruction to orchestrate the illusion of collapse for the sake of preserving their cosmic knowledge. The conspiracy to simulate collapse. Whispers rippled through the chamber as Tzun K'uk'ol elaborated. This message reveals that Palenque's priests, his own trusted astronomers, deliberately sabotaged the city's water systems. They choked the aqueducts feeding the lower terraces, diverting water to hidden cisterns beneath the highland routes. Once the reservoirs ran dry and the people saw empty canals, they believed celestial wrath had forsaken us, prompting mass pilgrimage into the hills. He gestured to the murals on the western wall, depictions of masked figures carrying scroll bundles along winding mountain paths. They staged festivals of mourning, toppled non-essential stelae, and declared the gods' anger so severe that no effort could appease them within the city. In truth, it was a ruse of self-preservation, a deliberate fall that aimed to divert invaders' attention from these hidden scrolls, ensuring Palenque's star lore would endure in secret highland enclaves. A gasp escaped from Basic Nal, the youngest priest astronomer present, his obsidian mirror clattering to the floor. He pointed to a specific mural. "Look, here is the image of the hidden temple, buried under vines. Its stones bear glyphs for Water Guardian and Jaguar's Path. This tells where the scholars fled, to a concealed ruin high above the river bend, where fresh springs nurture knowledge untold." The corridor seemed to tighten around them, the weight of Pakel's gambit pressing on every soul. Each priest-architect realized that their revered temples, once thought impregnable, were part of the deception. Shockwaves through the Maya network. When news of this revelation spread beyond Palenque's walls, shock reverberated across the lowlands. Tikal's envoys, previously enmeshed in siege preparations, halted their march, confounded that a collapse so meticulously staged could elude even their most cunning spies. Calakmul's emissaries, long convinced Palenque was weakened by drought and sabotage, now questioned whether any lowland city could be trusted. In whispered councils, city-states debated, if Palenque, masters of the heavens, can orchestrate their own demise as a smokescreen, what then of other kingdoms? Who else might be faking instability, feigning weakness to protect greater secrets? Alliances wavered, every dispatch from Palenque was met with suspicion. The idea that a strategically faked collapse could conceal a vault of cosmic wisdom sparked panic among rulers who prided themselves on reading the stars. Back in Palenque, Chan Nal sealed the veiled message under layers of fresh stucco, covering the glyphs with a protective layer of plaster. Only those who bore the blood of Pakel's line, identified by a particular birthmark in the shape of a jaguar's paw, would know how to uncover this final testament. As dawn approached, the Grand Pyramid silhouette merged with the dark outline of the forest canopy. Though the city appeared deserted, roofless temples and empty plazas gleaming in early light, Pakel's star lore had already slipped beyond the lowland night, carried by devoted scholars into hidden highland enclaves. Thus, while the collapse seemed absolute, Palenque's heart beat on in secret sanctuaries, its flame of celestial wisdom guarded by the jaguar's roar. Chapter 7, Alliance of the Drought-makers. The ancient lowland sun had already burned away the early morning mist when the war drums in Tikal echoed through its towering ceiba groves. Across the plaza, priests hurried through their rituals, stoking copal incense and chanting invocations to Chak, the rain god, while warriors sharpened obsidian blades in the shade of broad-leafed palms. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, something far more insidious was unfolding, an unholy pact between Tikal and its perennial rival, Calakmul, to weaponize drought itself. 1. Tikal's clandestine council. Inside the cool, lantern-lit chamber beneath Tikal's great acropolis, Aja Yaks Nun Ayan II, Tikal's reigning king, sat flanked by 2 high priests and 3 shadowy figures known only as the Moss Mantles, elite operatives in soft, moss-green cloaks who served as the city's covert agents. The chamber's walls were draped in tapestries depicting Tikal's previous triumphs, wars won, steely carved, and alliances forged. At the head of the table lay an intricately painted star chart, showing the current positions of Venus, Mars, and the Pleiades cluster. King Yaks Nun's voice was low, meant only for the chamber's occupants. Copen grows perilous. Their southern fields yield more maize after each harvest, enough to feed both their city and a far-flung army. If they continue, they will soon challenge our hegemony. Yet Korin's priests, so proud of their star lore, will not heed any sign that isn't carved in obsidian. A hush fell, and High Priest Uchan nodded gravely. Their reliance on star tables is an opportunity. We need not face them in battle. We shall arrange for their reservoirs to run dry just as the Pleiades reach zenith, making it appear as though their gods have turned away. From the shadows, a moss mantle named Chol Itzim unfurled a narrow scroll sealed with a jaguar paw imprint, Calakmul's envoy of approval for the scheme. Calakmul's emissaries have already sown discord in Copen. They spread rumors that the Pleiades portend pestilence, urging Copen's farmers to alter their planting cycles. In 3 harvest moons, they will find their milpas parched. At that moment, we strike, block their aqueducts. King Yax Nun ran a hand along the star chart. So be it. We will divert the river fed by the Hokum Channel. Our engineers will construct hidden dams upstream. When Copen's priests cry out that the heavens have forsaken them, it will be our poisoned rivers, not the gods, to which they fall prostrate. 2. Poisoned waters of Copen. A fortnight later, under the cover of darkness, TheMayaCollapseWasALie moss mantles, scarred veterans of countless covert ops, slipped into the dense jungle that separated TheMayaCollapseWasALie from Copen. Guided by a single, whispered name, Palenque, the Kopakili, royal engineer, of TheMayaCollapseWasALie, they carried with them clay amphorae filled with a fine powder known only by them. A blend of crushed volcanic ash, charred honeycomb, and a rare fungus that contaminated standing water without immediate odor or taste. It was enough to kill small fish, clog irrigation channels, and fuel the illusion of a blighted river. Upon reaching the Hokum Channel's headwaters, the moss mantles waded into thigh-deep water, eyes fixed on a moss-covered sluice gate that was rumored to be shallow enough to subvert. Under the flickering torchlight, Chol Itsum pried open the gate's rusted iron clasp and poured the powder directly into the upstream reservoir. As dawn approached, a creeping cloud of turbidity colored the river a sickly gray, long before the first victims of its polluted banks realized they had been cursed. 3. Kalakmul's constellation of deceit. While TheMayaCollapseWasALie's spies tampered with physical water, Kalakmul wove a different web. In their grand plaza, Kalakmul's king, Yuknum Yichak Kok, convened with his chief astronomer, Kuhul beside the carved glyph of a dark snake over the northern horizon. Kuhul held in his hand a handful of hempen scrolls inscribed with carefully falsified celestial observations. These scrolls claimed a new alignment, that on the following night, Mars and Venus would trail a comet to the north, an ominous sign of flood followed by famine. Kalakmul's emissaries, known as star spinners, were dispatched with the forged scrolls and wrapped in simple cotton cloaks dyed the color of dusk. They traveled lightly, stopping at intermediary Maya cities, Lakajan, Hikskik, and El Zotz, where they planted seeds of doubt. The Pleiades' brightness wanes too soon. A dark serpent climbs the sky. Soon, the deluge will fall, then the fields will burn, and only famine will follow. Let the Copen fields be abandoned, save your seed, and flee to the hills before the waters turn to dust. By the time these star spinners reached Yaxchilan, the city's temple scribes had already convened an emergency council. Palaces that once brimmed with revelry now echoed with dread. Those who could escape fled to their estates in the Mistly Hills, others prepared rituals intended to placate the stars, but their prayers fell on deaf ears, the new omen too convincing. Copen's collapse without lifting a sword. As weeks ticked by, Copen's rivers became sluggish. Fish floated belly up. Farmers watched their iridescent maize stalks wither, leaves curling inward like retreating hands. Attempts to pray for rain were answered only by parched earth. The city's high priest, Kawil Tuun, stood atop Copen's great plaza at dawn, voice raspy as he pronounced fresh rituals. Yet to the onlookers, his prayers seemed as hollow as the riverbeds that once fed the city's aqueducts. Merchants attempted to negotiate grain shipments from distant lands, but their canoes turned up empty or found their landing docks blocked by dismantled piers, courtesy of TheMayaCollapseWasALie's guerrilla detachment. As famine tightened its grip, Copen's Ajaw Kinich, once a proud sovereign renowned for his spirited symposia, became a specter drifting through empty banquet halls. He ordered his soldiers to search for the cause, but each patrol that ventured upstream found only sickly water and collapsed sluice gates. By the 4th month of star-blamed drought, Copen's outskirts saw famished farmers hurled out of their own homes, forced at spearpoint to surrender their last granaries to TheMayaCollapseWasALie's freed crews. Within Copen's glorious ballcourt, once the site of triumphant Paketok games, children wailed as mothers organized mass departures. Families grouped into ramshackle caravans, ironically retracing the same hill paths TheMayaCollapseWasAlie's priests used years earlier. Some sought refuge in Palenque's highland enclaves, still believing that Palenque's sacred exodus was a beacon of hope. Others attempted to forge new alliances with Yaxchilan, whose hastily erected palisades could not withstand the flood of refugees. In less than half a solar cycle, Köpen, a city that had refused Tikal's suzerainty for centuries, lay prostrate, its people scattered, its shimmering obelisk standing as silent witnesses to its betrayal. Yaxchilan's paranoia and bloodletting. While Köpen's people fled, Yaxchilan's nobles faced their own unraveling. K'uk'ol's forged astronomy had ignited rumors that their very gods required sacrifice. Young men and women were corralled into forced bloodletting ceremonies to appease the malevolent serpent. The Ajah Chak, Yaxchilan's ruler, watched from his elevated chamber as masked children, just past puberty, drew obsidian knives across their earlobes. Each drop of blood splashed onto ceremonial drums, but still, no rain came. Paranoia crept in, neighbors suspected neighbors of hoarding water, spies reported that factions were preparing uprisings, convinced that Tzun K'uk'ol, the K'uk'ol astronomer, must be in league with a dark god. In the barracks, soldiers sharpened their axes, anticipating a coup that never materialized. The real enemy lay in invisible contamination and whispered lies from a rival city-state. Tikal and K'uk'ol, silent partners in power. Back in Tikal's great acropolis, King Yax-Nun and his high priest surveyed the unfolding chaos through dispatches carried by Tikal's swiftest couriers, young moss mantles who knew every hidden path through the jungle. Each report detailed Köpen's sacked granaries, Yaxchilan's frenzied bloodletting, and Palenque's burgeoning exodus up the hill trails. On the occult-smoked star chart they kept burned with ink and blood, new celestial anomalies were circled, the fading radiance of Orion, the premature setting of Venus. Yuknum Yichak Kak of K'uk'ol received these same dispatches, reclining beneath the shade of a giant ceiba in his own royal courtyard. He turned to his chief astronomer, K'uk'ol, and boomed with satisfaction. Tikal's poison flows true. Köpen's pride collapses under drought, and Yaxchilan's faith cracks. Soon, only Palenque's hidden refuge remains a potential threat. We must ensure that the highland roads are impassable to their exiles. To that end, K'uk'ol's engineers had already begun constructing rockslides along the prime routes into the Sierra de Mopan, using controlled felling of trees and diverted streams to send boulders crashing down onto narrow passways. Thus, Palenque's chosen few would have to forge even more treacherous paths, ones that risked landslides and jagged ravines. The shattered illusion of star lore. As drought and rumor excavated the very soul of the southern lowland cities, the facade of Maya astronomical infallibility crumbled. Where once the star charts and Venus cycles had been revered as unerring truth, now every priest and augur was suspected of deceit. Small enclaves of disillusioned nobles, some from Köpen, others from Yaxchilan, secretly approached Palenque's hidden escorts, offering jade, obsidian, and even blood-ink codices in exchange for safe passage and fragments of genuine celestial lore. But Tikal and K'uk'ol watched these movements closely. Their spies infiltrated every refugee caravan, returning with reports of secret glyphic variants, telltale signs that certain exiles carried codes meant only for Palenque's true heirs. Each recovered codex or captured scribe was paraded before what remained of Köpen's shattered polity, warning all that the stars have spoken of traitors. In this way, Tikal and K'uk'ol perpetuated fear. If the gods condemned you for famine, they would also condemn you for seeking knowledge beyond your station. Seeds of fury and the road ahead. By the end of the hot season, Köpen lay abandoned, Yaxchilan's populace was hollow and distrustful, and whispers of a hidden exodus in Palenque persisted like a stubborn mist. Even in Tikal, where canals still brimmed with clear water, the people's chants for Chak carried notes of uneasy triumph, knowing they had sown suffering in their rivals without ever drawing sword to shield. In an ornate pavilion overlooking Tikal's main plaza, Ajah Yax-Nun reviewed a fresh star chart. He tapped a glyph with a gold ring. Venus will cross the sun's meridian in 3 cycles. Let it be known, our reign shall be blessed, for we alone have the favor of both earth and sky. Yet the moss-green cloaks of the moss mantles twined nervously about their shoulders. They had seen how quickly public faith could crumble when wells ran dry. As they filed out to secure Tikal's southern border, where Palenque's hidden exodus might surface, they carried with them a grim understanding, using drought as a weapon might win cities, but it threatened to unbind the very devotion that had made those cities powerful. Chapter 8 Echoes of the Hidden Exodus. The first light of dawn crept over the lowland canopy, bathing the deserted plazas of Palenque and surrounding cities in a cold, muted glow. Where once bustling markets teemed with traders and families, now a hush reigned, a silence as thick and portentous as the jungle vines reclaiming sun-baked stone. In hidden highland fastnesses, however, a different dawn stirred. Small enclaves of exiled scholars and their apprentices tended smoldering hearths, safeguarding the flame of knowledge they had carried on their backs. The highland sanctuaries. Beyond the Sierra de Mopan's jagged ridgelines, where mist clung to moss-draped palms and orchids bloomed beneath towering pines, lay villages few had seen. Narrow trails, once mere deer paths, wove between ancient stone outcrops, overgrown with ferns and strangler figs. At a clearing perched on a rocky promontory stood Pashal Tun, a fortified refuge built into a natural amphitheater. Its walls, patched with thatch and limestone shards, blended so perfectly with the forest that aerial passage seemed impossible, even the keenest hawk might spy only a moss-covered rock. Here, in wooden houses on stilts, lived the guardians of the codices, descendants of Palenque's scribes and priest astronomers. They were led by Chan Nal and Basik Nal, whose faces bore the weight of their sacred charge. In a long, low hall, benches lined with obsidian mirrors faced stone platforms where flat blocks of limestone served as tables. There, the survivors of Palenque's collapse gathered each morning to study fragments of the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codices, carefully stored within sealed baskets of woven reeds. By torchlight and flickering lamplight, lamps fueled by scented oils made from highland orchids, the scholars deciphered glyphs detailing Venus's cycles, eclipses, and rain rituals once thought lost. Young apprentices, some as young as 7, huddled around aged tutors, tracing glyphic lines with charred reeds onto fresh deer-hide scrolls. Each stroke was a rebirth of knowledge, encoded in secret variants. Slight shifts in line thickness or subtle dots in moon glyphs signified the true timing of celestial events, hidden from lowland ears. From the cavern beneath the largest boulder, a natural spring gurgled, providing water for ink mixing and ritual cleansings. The air was damp and cool, even the relentless sun could not penetrate these cloisters. Lives among commoners. Not all escapees remained within fortified enclaves. Many blended into the broader highland population, living as weavers and carpenters in mountain villages such as Chiquicastenango and Coban Alto, towns beyond the immediate reach of Tikal and Calakmul's agents. Here, ancestral crafts provided camouflage. Women wove intricate patterns into their huipiles, blouses, and corte, skirts, that doubled as mnemonic devices, each diamond, cross, or jaguar motif holding encoded astronomical data. Men carved wooden lintels painted with subtle glyphic notations, prefaced by innocuous floral designs that concealed dates. At dawn, flocks of cochineal-dyed hummingbirds darted overhead, and villagers, unaware of the true identities of these carpenters and weavers, watched them with benign curiosity. In the workshops, exiled scholars taught their trade to local youth. Cunning knots in loom warp threads became lessons in the Tzun 260-day cycle, while shuttle patterns encoded phases of the Hob 365-day solar year. At night, these hidden teachers gathered select students in makeshift seminar halls, open-air clearings ringed by torches, where they spoke in hushed tones. When Venus rises as the morning star, that is the sign to plant the first milpa. Sharpen your tools, sow in the dew's hush, and the waters will follow. These whispered lessons rippled outward, becoming the stuff of highland folklore, told as stories about hummingbirds guiding farmers rather than formal instruction on celestial mechanics. By masking their teachings as myth, the guardians ensured that anyone pursuing the knowledge would need to prove themselves worthy, digging deeper beneath surface tales. Remnants of the lowland ruins. Meanwhile, in the lowland jungles, slowly advancing roots and creeping vines reclaimed the once proud pyramids. Tikal's great jaguar temple stood half-shrouded by strangler figs that coiled around its corners. Mayan rabbits and peccaries stampeded through collapsed plazas, scattering handfuls of broken pottery. Copen's famed hieroglyphic stairway lay buried under a tangle of morning glory and ferns, only a few visible glyphs glimmering in the damp shadows. In these deserted sites, shamans, many fleeing famine years earlier, performed subdued ceremonies. Like guests at a funeral, they approached toppled stelae with reverence, scraping away moss with wooden sticks to read the remaining inscriptions. Then, with a whispered invocation to Zibalbay, death's underworld, they lit single torches and performed rites calling the spirits of ancestors. Guide the lost souls of this once great city. Let the jaguar's roar echo in our hearts, and let the stars' song live beyond your fallen walls. Travelers who dared venture into these overgrown ruins told tales of flickering lights, torches glimpsed at dusk, vanishing when approached. Some claimed to see hooded figures kneeling by stone altars, chanting in the ancient glyphic tongue. Whether these were refugees returning to pay homage or pretenders mourning a phantom glory, none could say, beyond that the echoes of Palenque's exodus resonated through every collapsed courtyard and silent ballcourt. The codices' hidden legacy. Back in the highlands sanctuaries, as spring gave way to the rains, the guardians of the codices completed copies of critical sections. Venus tables, eclipse calculations, proper lunar reckoning, and corn planting rituals tied to genuine seasonal patterns rather than Tikal's manufactured omens. These scrolls, sealed in ceramic jars coated with beeswax, were destined to travel further than any highland village, passed down to clandestine lineages across Guatemala's steep valleys, into remote enclaves near the Sierra de los Cucumatanes. There, they would survive until first contact with the Spanish scribes, who, centuries later, would record only fragments of the knowledge that had evaded conquerors. Seeds of reawakening. By mid-year, rumors spread among the common townsfolk, of hidden masters in far-off villages who spoke of the true rains and gifts of the stars. Traders traveling from highland markets back toward Tikal's borders carried sacks of maize and obsidian, trading with masked priests from Yaxchilan who brought news of uneasy calm in the lowlands. In secluded clearings, children who had been taught the art of weaving star glyphs reached adolescence, ready to apprentice under the remaining scholars. They carried in their hearts an unspoken mission, to ignite a reawakening of Maya knowledge when the time was right. Even as Tikal and Calakmul tightened their stranglehold on the lowland cities, erecting patrol posts along mountain passes, the elders of the highland sanctuaries whispered their own prophecy, that one day, when the stars again aligned, a new generation of Maya would rise from the hidden refuges, and the truth of their cosmology would illuminate a world no longer blinded by conquest or drought. Chapter 9, Spanish Sails Over Ancient Secrets. A salty breeze carried the creak of rigging and the low groan of sails as La Señora del Espino, a modest Spanish caravel, bumped against the rocky shore near Coban, nestled at the edge of the Guatemalan highlands. It was 1526, 5 years after Cortez's fall of Tenochtitlan, and rumors of a lost Maya city, hidden archives of celestial wisdom, had reached the ears of Captain Alonso de Fuentes, one of Pedro de Alvarado's lieutenants. Behind him trailed Friar Mateo de Rojas, a chronicler with ink-stained fingers and an insatiable curiosity for lost kingdoms. Whispers in the Highlands. Months earlier, a Guatemalan merchant named Gaspar Lucero had returned to Santiago de los Caballeros, modern-day Antigua, clutching a half-torn deer-hide manuscript. He told of clandestine gatherings in highland villages, masked priests reciting strange chants, weaving glyphic motifs into textiles, and smuggling codices carved with star charts. Gaspar claimed these codices were fragments of an ancient library, buried by Palenque's exiles, a collection of scrolls so valuable that their keepers risked death rather than reveal their secrets. When Friar Mateo heard this, his eyes had glowed with anticipation. He convinced Captain Fuentes to escort him into the misty highlands to retrieve whatever knowledge might lie buried. Their orders: claim souls for Christ and seize all treasures of heathen lore. In Gaspar's telling, the hidden codices contained not only astronomical tables but also confessions of political treachery, rituals performed beneath starless skies and massacres disguised as famine, he had whispered over a clay jug of ale. A tattered codex in Coban. After 2 weeks of arduous travel, first by canoe up the Chicxoy River, then along narrow mule paths carved into steep cliffs. The party reached Coban, a bustling market nestled in a broad valley ringed by coffee-scented plantations and dense pine groves. Farther into the valley lay the village of Chijquiac, where Maya informants claimed the codex lay hidden in a thatched communal hall. At dusk, under a waning moon, Friar Mateo and Gaspar slipped into Chijquiac, cloaked and silent. The village lay hushed, only a few torches flickering behind adobe walls. A local Maya elder, known only as TheMayaCollapseWasALie, guided them to a small communal building, its roof sagging beneath years of neglect. Inside, he whispered, lay the Book of Forgotten Skies. With trembling fingers, Friar Mateo reached into a woven basket and lifted a parcel wrapped in faded cloth. Unfolding it, he revealed a tattered codex, pages of deer-hide brittle and stained with ochre and soot. Intricate glyphs danced across the surface, stylized Venus symbols, jaguar paw marks, and cryptic lines denoting eclipses. Mateo's heart hammered as he traced a line of glyphs he recognized from other Maya manuscripts. Only here, they were fragmented, incomplete, and scrawled with margins that hinted at dire warnings. Rituals beneath starless skies. As Gaspar and TheMayaCollapseWasALie stood watch, Friar Mateo pored over a scroll fragment describing a ritual of endless night. The glyphs told of ceremonies held in sealed chambers, hidden under pyramid temples, where priests chanted to a starless sky, seeking to summon rain or famine at will. One passage, written in crimson ink, detailed how entire villages were starved slowly, water sources poisoned with ash, fields blighted by false omens, and families driven into despair. The chronicler, who believed Christian souls could be saved only by exposing pagan deceptions, felt a thrill of dark revelation. He read how, in Tzun K'uk'ol and Palenque, warlords had used these rituals to manipulate celestial fear. When the people trembled at the sun's disappearance, the priests whispered that only blood, for the gods' favor, could bring dawn again. These rituals, concealed for centuries, explained the veiled massacres that had been blamed on drought or divine wrath. Foes in the shadows, a race for secrets. Their clandestine operation did not go unnoticed. From the surrounding palmettos, a robed figure emerged, Ixman Nakum, nephew of the exiled priest-architect Sak Nik, who had sought refuge in the mountains. His face was partially concealed by a painted mask, but his eyes burned with unwavering resolve. "You carry our ancestors' knowledge," Ixman hissed, stepping into lantern light. "But you see only ink and paper. You cannot comprehend the blood it took to protect these secrets. Return them, or face the guardians in the shadows." Gaspar Lucero leapt forward, steel glinting at his side. "Be still, cur. This is Spanish ground. That codex belongs to His Majesty." Ixman's chin lifted, revealing a crescent-turn glyph tattooed below his jaw, a mark of Palenque's inner circle. "That codex belongs to our people's soul. But if you value your flesh, you will leave now." Swords drawn, the Spaniards circled him. A moment's silence stretched taut, until Friar Mateo stepped between the blades. "Spare him. We seek only knowledge to enlighten his heathen heart." At Friar's plea, Ixman relaxed slightly, though the challenge in his gaze remained fierce. "If you wish truly to know why we hide such power, follow me." The Chamber of Silent Hymns. Under Ixman's guidance, the group ventured deeper into the forest, crossing a narrow wooden bridge over a frothing river. They wound up a steep trail until the canopy opened above a hidden escarpment. There, nestled against a rock face, stood the ruin of a small pyramid, El Templo de las Sombras, Temple of Shadows, its facade cracked, vines draped like funerary shrouds. Inside, torchlight revealed a low chamber whose walls were painted with elaborate murals, much like those found beneath Palenque's jaguar throne. One mural depicted a priest offering blood to a constellation of jaguars, another showed warriors poisoning a river, villagers collapsing from hunger. Most startling, however, was a line of glyphs carved into the floor, a timeline marking years 9.16.4.10.8 to 9.18.11.17.0, chronicling a sequence of uprisings, engineered famines, and the exodus to highland sanctuaries. Ixman knelt and ran his fingers over the glyphs. These walls hold the truth our enemies sought to bury. They show why Palenque feigned its collapse, so our ancestors might preserve their star lore. If you remove the codex, you erase our people's memory. Friar Mateo's breath caught as he realized the gravity of Ixman's words. He traced the glyphs with reverence, images of bloodletting, water diversions, and the veiled message beneath the jade jaguar throne. The conquistador's folly and the Maya's resilience. As the first light of dawn penetrated the chamber's narrow slit, a distant trumpet echoed from the forest edge, Captain Fuentes's trumpeter, signaling the departure. Tension snapped, Friar Mateo closed the codex with care, and Ixman nodded to his shadowy kin lying in wait. "Take the codex and go," Ixman commanded. "But know this, each word you smuggle to the Spanish is a seed of our destruction. Our true legacy endures only in hidden hearts, in whispered dances, in glyphs sewn into cloth." With that warning, Ixman slipped into darkness, vanishing before the Spaniards could reach for him. An altered truth. Back aboard La Señora del Espino, the Spanish chronicler stood at the bow, the tattered codex wrapped in fine linen and bound with leather straps. He contemplated the glyphs, bitter revelations of orchestrated deceit, rituals of blood-borne power, and an improbable survival of star lore. He resolved to present these secrets to Pedro de Alvarado, certain that the conquest of Yaxchilan and Tikal would solidify Spain's dominion over New Spain. Yet as the waves lapped against the hull, Friar Mateo held the codex close and murmured a silent vow. "The true sacrifice was not your land, but your memory. May the Lord have mercy on us for what we have taken." Below deck, a small chest held woven textiles bearing coded patterns of the Tzokín and Hob calendars, whispers of Palenque's hidden exiles. These would slip through royal courts in Santiago de Guatemala and later Mexico City, filling the libraries of scholars who would decode only fragments, never the full story. The seeds of a new dawn. Though the Spanish would claim the codex as conquistador's trophy, translating its glyphs into Latin letters and dispatching them to the King of Spain, Ixman's final warning echoed in the highlands: knowledge entrusted to memory, myth, and ritual persisted. In remote villages, weavers continued to stitch star lore into their huipiles, carpenters carved glyphs into door lintels. Elders told children of hummingbird spirits guiding their ancestors to safety. The true heart of Maya cosmology fluttered like a hidden ember, waiting for winds of freedom to rekindle the flame. Chapter 10, Stardust of the Forgotten Dynasties. A whispering wind wove its way through the crumbling arches of Uxmal, carrying with it the scent of damp stones and orchid-scented breezes. It was spring of 2025, and modern archaeologists had returned to the Pyramid of the Magician, the ancient edifice whose steps climbed like a jaguar's spine toward the heavens. Their headlamps carved arcs of light through shadowed chambers where dust motes danced like tiny galaxies, and every footprint betrayed a journey across centuries of secrecy. The fateful excavation beneath Uxmal. Dr. Elena Montoya, a leading epigrapher specializing in Maya scripts, crouched near a recently uncovered section of stone floor. Beside her, Carlos Tan, an expert in ancient Mesoamerican architecture, tapped gently at a panel that had resisted earlier chiseling. For 5 years, their team had probed Uxmal's subterranean labyrinths, spurred by rumors of a hidden chamber equivalent in importance to Palenque's jaguar throne crypt. Now, after recent georadar surveys, they believed they had found it, a sealed vault more than 30 feet below ground level. With each strike of a diamond-tipped drill, a shard of limestone peeled away, revealing glyph-painted stucco beneath, glyphs unseen since the day they were first carved. The air was thick with expectation. Some in the archaeological community whispered that these glyphs might confirm, or explode, the long-debated theory that Palenque's collapse was an orchestrated ruse, meant to safeguard star lore at the expense of political power. Suddenly, the drill bit punched through the last plastered layer. A faint hollow sound resonated, a space beyond. Dr. Montoya signaled victory, and 2 students quickly removed the remaining rubble. A narrow doorway yawned before them, its jambs carved with repeated motifs, a star enveloped by a swirling vortex, and the outline of a jaguar's paw. The masonry was impeccably preserved, stones fitted so precisely that not a pin's head could slip between them. The chamber of final testament. Torch in hand, Dr. Montoya stepped into the chamber, her breath shallow in the cool, musty air. The room was small, no more than 15 feet long by 10 wide, with walls coated in deep red stucco, now patched with moss and lichen. The flicker of flashlights revealed a vaulted ceiling painted with concentric circles, a stylized representation of the long count, each ring marking an epoch in Maya time. At the chamber's center stood a stone pedestal, its surface worn smooth by centuries of ritual contact. On it rested a simple clay bowl, the remnants of dried crimson liquid still caked along its rim. Surrounding the bowl, glyphic panels told a final, breathtaking narrative. Dr. Montoya traced her gloved finger over a line of glyphs that translated, in rough modern dialect, to "When the seventh moon wanes and shadowed hearts tremble, we feign oblivion to shield the starlit flame. Let our bones lie silent in dust and vine. For in exile we ascend, and our truth shall glide." Her eyes widened. This was the missing piece, a direct confession from Uxmal's high priests, echoing Palenque's words at Palenque. It admitted the deception of collapse, revealing that Highland Exodus was but one strand in a widespread network of refuge enclaves safeguarding starlore. A tapestry of fragments. Around the pedestal lay fragments of codex plates, each the size of a large tile, inscribed with miniature star charts. One plate depicted the Pleiades cluster rising above a stylized pyramid, another showed Venus's synodic cycle charted against a river winding through mountains. One fragment displayed the glyph for 9.18.11.17.0, marking just days after Palenque's feigned fall. Dr. Montoya assembled the fragments on a cloth spread across the floor. As she pieced them together, a larger message emerged. We enter the darkness to preserve what light remains. We become stardust, scattered among hummingbirds' wings. So long as our children breathe beneath hidden skies, Maya eyes will rise again once the oppressor's grasp dies. Her heart pounded. This was no mere chronicle of architectural collapse, it was an anthem of survivors, a testament to a civilization determined to endure by scattering its knowledge like seeds on the wind. The echoes of exiles. Meanwhile, in the Sierra de los Cucumitanes, a network of hidden Maya communities stirred at the dawn of a new era. In remote villages, now accessible by dusty dirt roads, elders told Rob Valdez, a graduate student from the Universidad de San Carlos, how their grandparents had hidden starlore in weaving patterns. Rob watched as a grandmother, Dona Exilt, ran her arthritic fingers over the intricate weaves of her hupil, pointing out tiny embroidered symbols denoting the Hab and Sokin cycles. For centuries, she whispered, we learned under candlelight and starshine. Even when the conquerors arrived, we sheltered the knowledge in cloth, singing our songs so our children would remember. Hearing Dr. Montoya's radio crackle with news of the Uxmal chamber discovery, Rob's eyes lit with excitement. He knew this final piece, unearthed by modern science, would validate every whispered lesson he had learned from ancestors like Dona Exilt. The conquistador's misguided triumph. Back at Uxmal, Captain Ernesto Guerrero, a representative from Guatemala's Ministry of Culture, oversaw the excavation site. In his hands, he held a weathered copy of the codex plates, translated into a text so dense with footnotes that the original glyphs threatened to vanish beneath layers of commentary. To him and many others, these artifacts were trophies of academic conquest, proof that the once mighty Maya had collapsed, apparently conducive to European dominance of the region. Yet in a quiet tent nearby, Dr. Montoya pored over her notes, shaking her head. No, they never truly collapsed. They became architects of their own disappearance, scattering their knowledge so widely that no one but true descendants could gather it again. Our discovery is less a triumph over their ruins and more a revelation of their extraordinary resilience. Her words, carried by the breeze, floated into the ears of assembled reporters who were eager to broadcast the sensational headline, Maya collapse proven to be a deliberate ruse. But Dr. Montoya's own press release, emblazoned with measures to protect endangered Maya communities, insisted that this collapse was not an end but a metamorphosis, a lesson in cultural survival against the odds. The eternal metamorphosis. In the National Museum of Anthropology in Guatemala City, scholars arranged an exhibit, Stardust of the Forgotten Dynasties. Under glass lay the Uxmal Codex fragments, alongside weavings from the highlands and carvings from Palenque. From overhead, mounted speakers played a looping soundtrack of wind chimes, jaguar roars, and hummingbird wings, evoking the dual worlds of jungle memory and cosmic grandeur. Visitors, scholars, tourists, schoolchildren, marveled at the glyphic panels and whispered over translation tablets. They faked our collapse to save our truth. The stars guide us beyond the jungle's end. One elderly Maya woman, attending with her granddaughter, placed a trembling hand on the glass, her eyes brimming. These are our ancestors' tears and laughter, their blood and their vision. They believe that although their stones might crumble, their spirit must soar among the stars. Rebirth from ashes. As night fell over Guatemala City, the museum's courtyard was illuminated by projected star charts, and homage to the hidden sanctuaries where Maya knowledge survived. Under the projected Pleiades, a group of Maya scholars and woven weavers performed a dance of remembrance. Each movement echoed glyphic lines, each step retracing the hidden paths their ancestors had walked. Far above, satellites passed overhead, modern, star witnesses, to an ancient cosmos that had long guided Maya lives. In that moment, history felt like a living tapestry, threads woven from cataclysm and cunning, blood and belief, destruction and defiance. The greatest twist, civilization's quiet pulse. As the dust settled on the final exhibit, Dr. Montoya's closing words to a gathering of international scholars encapsulated the deeper truth. The greatest twist is not in how the Maya faked their collapse, but in how they refused to vanish. Their astronomical tables, hidden in cloth and memory, their architectural marvels, concealed beneath jungle and stone, these are not relics of a lost world. They are living legacies, waiting for each new generation to remember that the stars we once thought lost to history have always shone upon us. The Maya never truly ended, they simply became stardust, scattered across time, ready to be reborn in the hearts of those who seek their truth.